I want to tell you guys something about this plate here. This plate has been on my desk for probably close to 10 years now. It's just a cheap little plate. It just says hand painted stoneware from Japan. I have no idea where it was made, what material it is. I guess it's stoneware. But this plate was given to me by the youth pastor that I worked with when I lived in Chicago, and he was challenging us to think about sin and how sin breaks things. And he broke a bunch of plates in the lesson, and then he told us all to take a plate home and remember the forgiveness that we have, that we can be whole like this plate, despite the fact that we sin and we break things. And so this plate has sat on my desk for about 10 years, simply so that I remember that fact that he challenged me to. And mostly it just sits there. Sometimes I use it for little things. It's like a tea plate. It has this rim, so it's not really a whole lot of use for other things. But here's the idea, guys. We move forward by looking back. We're talking about spiritual disciplines, and this is our last video of our spiritual discipline series. We're transitioning to summer. We're putting, hopefully we're putting coronavirus in our rearview mirror here, and it would be easy to just move forward and put all these last 3 months in a box and kind of throw them out the window and say, okay, glad I got through that part of my life. Now I'm moving on to something new. But sometimes the best way we can grow, the best way we can move forward, is by looking back and remembering what has happened, what God has done in our lives. We could easily see the last 3 months as, at best, just a period we all had to get through, but at worst, we could see it as a waste. But what if it wasn't? How can we become better followers of Jesus despite our difficulties? Well, we can do that by looking back, seeing how God has worked, and then celebrating that. See, the Old Testament is full of Jewish festivals that the people would celebrate as a way to look back on what God has done. Judges 2 explains what happened when the people of God stopped remembering the things that God had done in their lives. I'm just going to read a couple verses from Judges 2 here. Starting in verse 10, it says, "After that whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. Then the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals. They forsook the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who had brought them out of Egypt. They followed and worshipped various gods of the peoples around them." And then the verse goes on and on to talk about the ways that they didn't remember God, that they followed other gods, and then God sent in people to oppress them. And that's the theme of the Judges, and great book to read. But what I want to key in there is that verse 10. The generation gathered to their ancestors, they died, and up comes another generation who didn't know what God had done. They knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. So what did they do wrong? They forgot what God had done for them, and that caused them to drift away from the Lord and eventually to start worshiping other gods. And that's a slow drift, but it starts when they are not remembering what God has done. So we cannot forget. We must remember, commemorate, and celebrate the things that God is doing in our lives, even during the time of Corona, right? Even during the time of lockdown. See, Jesus did this. Jesus celebrated the Passover with his disciples. What was Passover? It was a holiday that taught the people to remember that God brought them out of Egypt, which was a miraculous thing. There was the 10 plagues, there was the parting of the Red Sea, but so much so a whole nation were able to free from their captors without losing any of their lives. So Jesus celebrated Passover. It's kind of like how we celebrate things like coming up the 4th of July, right? We celebrate the 4th of July because it helps us remember, this key part of our history. Jesus even celebrated Hanukkah. Yeah, John 10:22 says that Jesus went to go celebrate the Feast of Dedication, which was the Feast of Hanukkah. Hanukkah was a celebration and a commemoration of the purification of the temple a number of years before Jesus was born. So my last challenge to you guys this season is to do the spiritual discipline of celebration. Celebrate what God has doing. I want you to look back on the past 3 months of your lives during this whole Corona lockdown, and I want you to do 3 things. I want you to remember, I want you to commemorate, and I want you to celebrate. So first, remember. I want you to actually take some time and sit back and think about what God has done. Reflect on the last 3 months and think through, wow, what are ways that God has shown you his power, shown you his strength, his care, his comfort and concern for you. Really sit down and think. And if it helps you, write it down. What are the ways that God has been working in your life? What are the things that God has done in the last 3 months? So remember those and actually take time. Don't say, okay, well, the three things that I can remember in the first minute. No, spend some good time praying and asking God, what have you done in my life? So let's remember. Number 2 is commemorate. Commemorate has the idea of we want to remember. You hear the word remember and commemorate, but commemorate has the idea we want to remember something, so we do something, or we set up something, or we create, or we make something that trains us to remember what's going on. So that's what holidays are. Holidays are commemorations of something, right? That's what this plate is. This plate commemorates the lesson that my pastor's name was Tim, Pastor Tim, taught me. And so every time I see this plate, I think about that lesson and I can remember it because it's commemorated with the plate. So I challenge you to commemorate. Take 1 or 2 or even 3 of those things that you've remembered and commemorate it somehow. That could be you could create something, you could find something like a plate, you could write something out, do something that's going to help you remember what God has done, and then celebrate it. I want you to celebrate it, to praise God for it, to think through what great things God has done and to thank him. And so when we celebrate, we often don't just do it by ourselves, right? We have a party, we invite others and we tell them about it, right? When we celebrate someone's life with a birthday, hopefully you get your friends together and then you all do something to celebrate that person. So celebrate it. Get your friends together and talk about it. Say, these are the things that God has done over the past 3 months. And by doing that, it'll really help us in these last 3 months, not just to see them as a waste of time or something that we got through, but a way that God has really been growing us and teaching us. I hope you guys have been blessed by these videos. I hope you've been challenged to do some different spiritual disciplines, and I hope that you will carry out some of these disciplines with the rest of your lives. These are not just things that we can do during a lockdown, but they're things that we can do our entire lives because they help us grow closer to God. All right, thanks, guys. Hopefully I'll see you soon.